Hello, everyone. This is episode 59 of the Justin Files podcast, member of the Broken Jars Network, and this episode is going to make your head hurt.
Mine already hurts.
Yeah.
So can I do disclaimers real quick?
Yes.
Okay. We're going to talk about free will, kids. All of it, as much as we can. There's too much. Okay. So we're not going to answer the mysteries of the universe, and we're not going to tell you to join a religion, and we're not going to tell you who's right and wrong and whatever. This episode, we're going to focus on who has it and what we've seen them doing with it for the most part. And in a future episode, we are talking about seeing the implications of that in the cosmology. But because the last episode got a little preachy, even for my tastes, I just wanted to say, like, we're going to have fun with it. We're going to talk about some serious things. This is not church. So don't get like upset about anything that we say, or, you know, who's right and wrong and who murdered who and, you know, whatever. So, okay, yeah, I'm good.
And then at some point, we're also going to cuss, and we're going to spoil everything, even beyond the stuff in the books. So
we're going to possibly spoil the future when all of our crazy-ass ideas come true.
Better, I'm going to refer you to the same person.
No, stop.
It's a mantle.
I was like, wait, who did she say? No.
It's a mantle, I swear.
So who do you want to start with? Because we were talking about the Denarians last time, and that's how we got into shenanigans in the first place.
So the Denarians and the She are kind of the obvious starting points. Like, for example, the She can't lie. So Maeve thinks that she has free will because she can lie. And then Harry points out the fallacy: if you can lie to yourself as well, it's not just a superpower.
I mean, it is, but
I wonder if She are like brutally honest with themselves, or they like use their circular logic talk with themselves to kind of lie to themselves.
Yeah, it's interesting to think of like how much is it like driving them in how they think of themselves and their intentions.
Okay, you've already tipped the cart off the rails, so I was going to reply with Mab. It's like Mab doesn't lie; she just is. She is Mab. Okay, so she's a force of nature. I know the lesser She, like, it opens it up, and if you want to take it all the way down, like, I mean, we have to talk about degrees of free will, almost, right? Because we've got the wild Fae haven't made a choice, and changelings haven't made a choice. So there's definitely free will there. And this actually, I'm glad I thought of that, because that's going to help me later with the angels thing.
Oh,
yeah.
Alrighty.
So do we want to start from the mortal layer up? Should we do it that way?
Okay. So we'll take, say, humans.
Right. And they have all the free will.
At least we think so. Maybe there's a level that we don't have.
As far as we know, they are the most free of the will.
And then you have, say, changelings. They don't seem to be restricted in any form of, like, lies or anything else, but they have this choice hanging over them about if they're going to choose their She half and join that court or whatever it is and be whatever that is.
Right. Like being an ogre, because that's fun. Or was she a troll? She was a troll. Sorry.
Yeah.
Ogre's the summer court. Trolls are the winter court. Important. Meryl, right? She was a troll, I think.
Yeah, but did we see an ogre? Oh, yeah, we did. Sort of. Well, there was the chainsaw. The muscle. Yeah.
There's that dude with the chainsaw and the string.
But that was even just that was a disguise. He wasn't actually an ogre. He was just
right, because he was a centaur. Hiding as an ogre, pretending to be the dude dressed as the other dude.
Yeah.
Gotcha. Either way, still a Fae. So not like a great disguise, right? He could have disguised himself as something not going to get its ass kicked by iron. So
yeah, that's a good point. Or not obviously connected to the summer court.
Right. Like, ooh, you got me there. You masqueraded as the dumb guy, so.
Sorry about that. My Chrome tab crashed.
Oh, we didn't actually notice.
There's two of me in here now.
Very stoic.
You multiplied. Somehow you had the free will to multiply. I'm going to throw this into everything.
Wow.
Okay. So we have, like, let's say the lesser Fae of, like, whatever normal level. Like, how much free will does Toot have versus anything else? Like, the bigger you are, both in weight and size, maybe that affects how much you're able to do.
Toot has complete free will as long as there's not pizza involved.
Well, that's part of the thing too, right? So, like, Toot can be summoned, and I guess, you know, in a manner,
you gotta have his true name, though.
Right, but in a manner of speaking, that might apply even to mortals, right? Because Harry's worried about people exercising. So, like, is there somebody off the street I could work magic on him if I had his true name? Or is it more because he's a wizard, and more because Toot is a fae?
Well, and then that's the thing of, like, as humans, we can change our names. It doesn't seem that maybe she can't do that as much.
Right.
Denarians probably certainly can't.
And maybe that's part of it, is like the more power they get, the less malleable they are, right? So
yeah, the more restricted you are, it seems that, like, the more power you get, always the more restricted you're going to get, and the avenues you're able to use. That's just the way that Butcher builds everything. For example,
well, and that's certainly ties into, like, all the way up. That seems like it's applicable. It's not like, well, what about this exception? No, I mean, a lot of the rule sets in the who has free will and what can they do with it stems from power. In the sense that we were talking before the show, and maybe we'll have time to actually get that far today, but talking about things on Mother Winter's weight class, for example, and, the Archangels, they basically don't have any choice at that point, or if they do, bad shit happens.
Yeah, I mean, it's just, well, I'll do it now, but so the mothers, they will have the same restriction if they can't lie, but as you pointed out before we started recording, is that not only can they not tell a lie, but they couldn't even influence Harry as to what to do with the unraveling. As soon as he asked, like, what do I do with this thing? They're hands off, it's yours.
Mm-hmm.
So it's kind of upgrading from, like, okay, Mab can't lie, but Mab, or say Leah or someone, they can, like, do their not lying and influence someone to do whatever they want.
Right.
And the mothers can't even do that.
So to fill in that a little bit, so we had one of our listeners / brain trusts, give us a post. Yes, give us a post from the Jim Butcher forums from Serac, who is a Beta Asylum reader, as I understand, and basically had this grand unifying theory, which is like, oh my God, we're not getting into that today, but it is going to shade some of what we're talking about. And his notice / proposition was that, once you get up to that level, you can't impact their choice, but you can give them tools. You can give them power. And that's what the unraveling was. And that's what Uriel giving the grace was, and things like that, where it's like, please don't crash my airplane. Just use the flashlight. Like the whole thing with Uriel, where it's like Uriel couldn't so much as tell any directions or instruction or anything whatsoever with Michael. He just said, I trust you know what to do with this. Please don't fuck us both, and therefore the entire universe potentially,
And
so
Uriel basically even said it is like, I can't stop you from doing this choice of walking outside the gate, but I can help you do it.
Right. And that's because that's all what that came down to, is like, otherwise you're going to be walking to your death. Like, and there was a little bit of a conversation about, like, once you're outside the gate, we can't protect you. And then Uriel's like, well, I don't know about that, but yeah.
So there are clearly degrees of free will, and it's not that, I mean, okay, I say clearly because I've drank the Kool-Aid on this, I guess.
It seems apparent.
Yeah.
So to us,
for example, anyway, they have the degrees of free will. The mothers seem to be the most restricted because they are the most powerful. And then basically flip side of what's going on with the Denarians. They seem immutable, but they did change at some point. And they had choices that is clearly still affecting them, but they're not the same as the demons, who apparently don't have choice, right?
Yeah, and that's kind of where I think the free will discussion for me gets hazy, is that, like, clearly the fallen are influencing your choice, right? And so to a degree, they are exercising choices and decisions themselves, which doesn't seem to be, it seems to be like an English problem, right? Like, there's free will, and then there's, like, free will, right? There's, like, your everyday choice. Why did you eat Trix instead of Cap'n Crunch today? And please endorse us, but it could have been 100 different cereals. But why did you pick one cereal over the other, right? That's a level of free choice. Whereas I think when we're talking about on the cosmological scale, We're talking more like, why did you decide to, help that old lady cross the road and possibly avoid some accident, or, stuff like you would see from The Warrior, right? Where to Harry, they were innocuous choices and yet still played out on the cosmological scale because Uriel showed up and explained it to him. Stuff potentially like what we're going to get from Mirror Mirror, which I think is still a much, much bigger choice, but obviously not the same thing as like, what do I eat today? And so that's where I have a problem, right? Because the Fallen and demons, they do, like, their choices tend to revolve around fucking somebody, right? Like Chan Zigguroth is getting Harry's names, not for a good thing, but that he's choosing to bargain on that level. Whereas like when we talk about the angels and demons and the Fallens, their free will, it seems like, and again, kind of lifting this from Sarek's post just because it seems to make the most sense to me, was they got one choice. They got to make one altering choice as to like, which team do you want to play for the rest of eternity?
Okay.
So
I have a big question. Assuming that basically demons and she are able to, like, if they're compelled to do a certain thing, like I have this debt and I am compelled to use it, they have choices on how to get it. But demons and she, they're not Denarians.
Right.
Is a Denarian free to choose what they do with their host? As an example, Lashiel will always try to work with her host. Magog tries to burn them out.
And right.
Is Magog free to change that?
Right. Is that a preference, or is that just like he's the demon fallen of, burning out your free will? So to fill in a little bit on that, there's some word of Jim that talks about the fact that the Fallen become more powerful the more they partner with their host. Whereas it seems like Magog and Ursiel, for example, tend to just, ramshackle / shackle the mind. We saw Rasmussen in Death Masks, for example. Dude thought he was in control, but he was pretty much shackled up to a wall there, and so, like, even being a prisoner, he was going to spit in Harry's face. And I sense the similar thing from Magog, but the wrinkle in that is Sonya, right? Mm-hmm. Because they can also escape. So was Sonya not a host long enough? Like, I don't know what all of that is. Like, in a way, it's almost more questions, but it's a good question. Like, does Magog have choice, quote unquote? Like, could he decide, oh, well, this is boring, always punching shit, I should go learn to be a spellcaster? Or theoretically, because he's an angel, he already has that knowledge. He just prefers not to use it for some reason,
The question is, we know angels are very limited in their choice. There are consequences if they choose to do something. I wonder if they are, even, like you said, with the cereal. Are they able to do small stuff just for themselves? Like, do I want Captain Crunch, or do I want something else? Or are they not allowed to make these tiny decisions either?
Well, and it's tough because you could apply that to all of the Fallen, right? Like for Lashiel, for example, she's a seducer and uses fire. Whereas Cassius is the snake guy,
You can't assume that she uses fire. She got attached to two people who like fire independently of each other. So it's like, you can't.
But those 2 points make a line, and we can't. Either way, we don't have like the wrinkles so far are Magog and Ursiel, because they're really the only ones we've seen have two hosts that had little in common, right? Or theoretically, because like Lashiel, the hosts, they were both, branded or chased by the White Council. They were both, pyros of some kind. Like the similarities there are, I think, beyond coincidence. Especially from a writer like Jim, right? He didn't just be like, why don't I take Harry and I'll make him a girl, and then we'll just put Lashiel and show you what that would have been like. And I mean, maybe that's possible, but I feel like that's potentially some
it could be clues. Something that leans toward Lashiel in the way that, like, Harry described Hannah Asher and how she uses fire. She always used a thing that it's offensive. It was never ever defensive. She didn't try to protect herself. She burned 3 men from the inside out. And it's like the way she thought of it and how emotional it was for her in that way is something that Lashiel would use.
Sure. Okay.
Which it could just be like happenstance on Harry's part. It could be something that Lashley would try to seek out in someone and help use, because fire, it seems like, very angry associated. So if you're going to be doing magic that way, you're going to use that association.
Well, and to add a little bit to this as well, Nicodemus more chose Lashiel for Dresden.
Yeah.
And because he says that directly. I knew I chose the right coin for you. And it seems like maybe Lashiel and Enduriel had some conversations along those lines as well, potentially. Like, I doubt you get very far treating the Fallen as just like a glove or some accessory that you just pass around willy-nilly. There's probably, Nicodemus is very much inclined to be a partner, right? He's going to partner with you, but he says the line, I knew I picked the right coin for you, Dresden. So I wouldn't really be surprised if he picked it for Hannah, for the same, same type of, same level, same
There's a reason
criteria.
Why, I guess they kind of, I don't know how much Hannah was pretending or not. Like, you lie with the truth, right? Often. That they kind of clicked. They seem like they're sort of similar personalities.
Lashiel and Asher?
Asher and Harry.
Oh, okay. Right.
I think that he probably... I think he picked that coin for her, not just because it was the only one he had. I think they were a good match. Like Harry and Lashiel was probably not a pretty good match.
Well, and it goes it's all of it, right? Like, maybe he found Asher because she was good, but also because she's got a similar background as Harry. So she's got the, yes, I'm a bad guy, but I've got the tragic, I was pursued and they were going to hurt me, spin. And then, gave her, because, Nicodemus got as many people coins as possible in his thing, right? Like, he knew Harry wasn't going to make that mistake twice. So I'm sure he didn't even try again. But, the Genosqua, or however you pronounce that, God, I hope we get a thing for that someday. Or I should go look it up anyway. But, he gave him Ursiel's coin.
Just say it I can't remember his name. James
Marsters.
I say that he doesn't. Yeah.
Oh, okay. I haven't listened to his audiobook version yet, so that was what I was thinking when I'm like, man, I can't wait.
Genosqua.
So okay, so just Genosqua. Cool. Anyway, so he gave him Ursiel's coin, right? So theoretically, the Genosqua was wanted to team up with him a little bit, like he had some reason to want the power or whatnot. Was there anybody else he ended up giving a coin? Did he try and give it to Gray and Gray just didn't bite? Or I think that didn't happen.
Something like that. And there's that Gray was acting interested in the discussion.
Mm-hmm.
So it could have, if they had the discussion but not actually given him anything.
Right. And he didn't seem to give one to Binder. So yeah, I don't know. I guess I should probably go reread that and see if there are hints as to why that happened. But anyway, long story short, I guess we're kind of getting in the weeds a little bit it's interesting, like how much choice or how much can they even affect it, right? Like maybe demons of Chauncey's level they'll always try to negotiate with your name, and then they get driven back to lesser choices. Whereas, the Denarians are always going to try and partner with you, or they're always going to try and override your free will, because that's part of, their personality. What do you even say, since they're a soul? Like, they're not a makeup of choices. That's their pattern, basically. It's their niche in the universe in a way. So,
pattern. That's a reference to something else.
This is not the Sanderson.
I'm in the middle of the third book, okay? I can't help it.
Yeah, that was an inadvertent reference on my part, so you're welcome. But
oops,
my brain really hurts right now.
I know, right? We said this is going to be a big one, so
I know. It's just that I can't even formulate half the shit I'm thinking about, but just kind of like, how much choice does a freaking Denarian have in what they do?
Right.
So let's go back to the first choice, or maybe the only choice they seem to have.
Right.
I think this was just according to Sarak's theory, right? Nothing else. Just that they had one choice, and that's what created the schism, I'll call it, the fall and all of that.
Right. Like it's one of those things that I'm not sure has been stated explicitly. And the nearest reference I can think of in the books is like Lashiel talks about how she had the choice like everybody else did, but she tried to play both sides and then got cast out anyway. Right.
That was a word of Jim, though. That wasn't actually something she said in the books.
Okay. So either way, like that is canon, basically, right? Like, I mean, ish, it hasn't been written down in the books. It's not published, so he could change his mind later. But it's the next best thing we've got to that. And so extrapolating from that point, it seemed like Sarek took the maybe obvious idea, because when I read it, I'm like, yeah, no shit, that makes sense. And basically said that something along the lines, I'm paraphrasing, and if I'm missing the mark, I apologize, but it's like, the whole rebellion in heaven kind of revolved around a choice. And so extrapolating from that, I basically say, and maybe the rebellion of heaven thing is my part too, where it's just basically like, look, what, in the land before time, God created the heavens and the earth, and all the angels were there, and they were all angels at the time, even Lucifer and so forth, and everybody was happy and shit. And then
Lucifer was in fact actually the angel. He was a cool kid in town.
Right. And that also depends on your religion and your background. And like, there are levels here that I'm trying to extrapolate into their barest forms. But long story short, whatever he did kind of kicked off the rebellion. Some angels decided to side with him. Some did not and were cast out anyways. And those are pretty, typical themes that you're going to find universally. And then the ones that decided to stay. So I'm saying decided a lot because the implication seems to be like they were at one point given a choice, but from our limited human understanding, I don't understand how that's possible. Like,
maybe Lucifer's it's after that whole thing went down, he was like, Ixnay on the choice.
Well, maybe, but it's like you had to have choice up to a point. And so, because it's like, you didn't see like God go over to Lucifer, like the white God, and be like, hey, Lucifer, you want to rebel today? No, that's cool. We'll see you tomorrow, or whatever. Like at some point he like rebellions don't just happen, and maybe they do on angelic scales because the power's involved. But like theoretically, there would have been, discussions or some form of communication between him and the fallen as his lieutenants and a bunch of other, of these metaphysical creatures. Like, again, we've got to go through the Demon Reach filter down to the Bob filter to the My Brain filter, right?
I don't know if you misunderstood me. What I mean is, up until the rebellion happened, angels had free choice. Maybe. Then they rebelled, and then God was like, "Okay, Ixnay on the choice, nay, you got too much power. I put too much faith in you."
And that's possible, but yeah, I think it comes down to the power again, and then that kind of taking that backwards, right? Taking that theory, so the universe was formless and chaotic because these angels, for lack of a better word, like I don't know if they were something else before they made their choice, right? They were running around creating universes and destroying worlds and making worlds and shit. Like, is that the primordial ooze pre-Big Bang type of stuff?
Perhaps that's how God made our universe. Like, it's a big job even for Big G.
He made a bunch of worker bees and they ran around.
And that's how they had choice, because they had to make decisions with breaking solar system and planets and etc.
Right.
And then when they were done, he was like, okay, you can't have choice anymore. And then some angels were like, oh, that's cool. And others, like Lucifer and his people, were like, that's not cool. We want to make choices. And they rebelled. That could also happen.
Yeah, I mean, it sounds good. Like it's got a feel there. I think it could be expanded on, because the other thing is like, taking your free will thing. Maybe that was their final choice. Maybe not their only choice. Was their final choice was, all right, you can side with me, or you can side with Lucifer. And then the ones that were like, yeah, well, the deadline was midnight, but and I fell. Because that seems to be the word of Jim.
Fell asleep on the couch, and then that was a whoopsie.
Yeah, right. Like with Lashiel's thing, where she was a fence sitter until it was too late. And that's shown up in a couple of different, teachings for those sorts of ideas. Anyway, that I've seen, where there's three sects, of the angels during the rebellion, basically. Go for it. What were you going to say?
It could also just boil down to Butcher has made the decision in the story that, but that doesn't make it very interesting to talk about, that he was like, okay, the angels don't have decisions, they can't make choices, that's because they're too powerful. Right. And he never really gave thought to the whole, how did they even choose to rebel?
Well, and there's a fair bit of that. I mean, like going through Sarek's post, for example, like there is a ton of stuff that is awesome, and there's a ton of stuff that lines up very nicely, doesn't still make it what actually is happening in the Dresden Files, right? And part of why we want to talk about this, though, is because it feels like that's more and more the implication for where the story is going, right? Like, in Changes, we largely left behind the mortal realm from Harry's perspective. I think we're about to double down on that a little bit in Peace Talks.
Yeah, Peace Talks, a big return to the whole mortal well, at least we're getting back into that world, because we haven't been there much. Even if we've run around in the mortal world, it's all been big stuff and all supernatural, not so much a case that evolved like it used to be, and right. Which I'm looking forward to.
And not just that, but once he blows the lid off of the supernatural community, take that and take the next stories we know anything about, right? We've got the next one, he's not even going to be on our Earth for most of it, theoretically, because mirror, mirror, which is a thing we're going to build up to anyway. Then we've got he's going to look for a murderer hunting old gods. So maybe that's back to the good old days, except, they're gods underneath it all. And then we've got the fucking Leviathan or the kaiju, whatever, and the dragon stories, where it's like, Farovex can't be on our planet because he will crack reality. So I don't know how we're going to still be in Chicago, quote unquote, and have.
Where did you hear that or read that?
I think it's a little bit of word of Jim, and it's also inferred in Grave Peril that he has to be here like this because his true form would crack the foundation.
So it's kind of like he's not actually here. It's more like he's like sent like a sliver of himself, and the real him is in the Never Never or in some other dimension.
Yeah, you could use Aspect, you could use Avatar, if you want to go H.P. Lovecraft's route, like the fact that you see Cthulhu, that's actually just the shadow he casts from.
Yeah, there's something in the book series called the Heartstriker Chronicles, which is like there's some Cthulhu-ish mythos in that too, where it's like there's a Leviathan. They can take any form. They're called like empty voids or something. They end worlds. They're like what's between dimensions. I think that's Lovecraftian in some way, shape, or form.
Okay.
The way it is like that. There's like when they're influencing a world, it's basically like their shadow. It's like a little bit of themselves that's poking into the dimension, but the rest is outside.
Yeah, and that's definitely a kind of a Lovecraftian idea where it's like the Tesseract, right? And like the form that we see of the Tesseract is the third dimensional shadow of the fourth dimensional object that is the Tesseract. If you don't have a headache yet, you should now, but it's that kind of thing. So anyway, so that's kind of where it's like, it's tough. Like we might get close to the mark, and I'm one of those, like, I love to speculate, right? But I don't stay with something too long, and I don't get married to an idea, because guess who the boss is? Jim. Like you said, he's going to write what it is for his story, and he might be inspired by some of these things, and that'll give us clues to maybe figure it out first, if that's, a thing for you. But shit, I'm not reading the Dresden Files for the 8th time, so I got nothing better to do. I might as well speculate. One of the ones that I wanted to circle back to real quick and hopefully get us back to a terrestrial level that makes a little bit more sense was talking about Mirror Mirror and the Warrior, because these are both stories that actually show
us.
Is
the Warrior?
That's Michael's side story from Side Jobs, right?
It's when Alicia Carpenter got kidnapped.
Oh, that's such a good. Is that in the old compilation? Is that coming in the new compilation?
No, it's the old one.
Yeah.
I think I have it on Audible. I need to listen to that again.
Right.
Especially the Warrior. It's a really good story.
Yeah. So the primary story, like the A plot, mostly is Harry running around being Harry, and this rogue pastor from some sect or whatever decides to kidnap Michael's kids to try and get at Amarachius, because Amaracchia shouldn't be in the hands of a wizard, and it needs to be in the field. It's a weapon. It's got to be on the field. It's got to be used. Along the way, we find out at the end that Harry's made all these tiny decisions, such as saving a little kid from getting run over by chasing their ball into the street, but also noticing that they had bruising and whatnot that the mom was in denial about, and therefore the mom leaves the dad and saves the kid and mom from a life of violence and shit like that. So, it's one of the preachier stories, and not necessarily as like a derogatory, but, if that's not your kind of thing, it is. Because at the end of it, Harry's kind of kicking himself because they kind of like beat this guy up and treat him like a generic bad guy, but he wasn't. His head was in the right space, even if it wasn't all the right decisions.
He wanted to do something good, but he wasn't. He was an end justifies the means kind of guy.
Right. And so he hashes this out with Uriel, one of the Archangels. And Uriel's like, that was all really important and stuff, but the stuff that you don't realize was the little decisions. It was the little choices that you made while you were doing this where the battle was really won. Sure, what he was going to do with Amaracchius was kind of a big deal, but did you know that you saved this kid and you saved that guy and you did this just by saying these tiny little acts of kindness, tiny little, one-liners that you gave while you were doing all these other shenanigans, right? And so it ties back to the idea that not only, and this kind of goes into Ghost Story a little bit as well, but like not only are the angels concerned about free will, but like all the way down, like one little choice affects the universe. And I think that's a Word of Jim that I read on some of his, like he's got a free will section that we went through on the Word of Jim website. But like the archangels and the angels are concerned about choices. They're not necessarily out there like fighting demons in these massive armies on the plains of Elysium or whatever. They're dealing with mortals and trying to help them make these right choices or be around to make sure choices don't get interfered with, like what we see from Changes and in Ghost Story, where one of the Fallen, presumably Lashiel, at least in my headcanon, broke the rules and talked Harry into offing himself, So that's another choice where we kind of see the Archangels show up. Director, you got a lot of perplexed looks there.
Yeah, I started thinking about Mantles. Well, you're talking about angels and demons and all that crap, but us back to Mantles. The Black Staff, is it a mantle or not? Well,
right.
It's an artifact. The common theory is that it's Mother Winter's walking stick, which I love. It's great. But if it's a mantle, it is the only one that gives more choice than restricts you, because it allows you to break the laws of magic and not get sucked into whatever happens to warlocks. Whatever does happen, if the White Council is right, then there's a ticking time bomb of no matter what, you're always going to go back to doing more black magic.
Right.
And if they're right, it is restricting their choices. In the Black Staff,
not necessarily in a bad way, but I see what you're saying. Yeah.
I mean, if it is inevitable, then you're no longer able to choose not to.
Right.
And the Black Staff is the only thing that seems to allow people to withstand those choices and not have to be making it again.
Right. You're coming at it from an interesting angle, and I see what you're saying, because the Black Staff doesn't give you more choices per se, but it preserves your right to choose.
Yes.
In a way. Yes. And so, yeah, that is kind of interesting, because like with the grace, with Uriel giving the grace, like if it's some kind of similar mechanism as that, where it's like in this case, it just happens to be a physical manifestation as well. It's giving them more options,
If we assume that the grace is some sort of mantle, which is like, I would agree with that to some extent, right?
Right.
Michael is able to make all the choices he wants with it, but it has consequences.
Right.
And I think like the Black Staff, you're able to make all the choices you want. There's consequences. I think it's something to do with the nature of the mantle itself. Like the Fae mantles change you fundamentally.
Right.
Whereas
But
giving the grace or having the black staffs empowers you. They're both mantles. Maybe they're like different types of mantles.
Right.
I have more questions. Okay.
Okay.
The winter night mantle.
Right.
Uriel uses his 7 words to say Mab doesn't control Harry. He gets to make his own choices.
Right.
She just can influence him just like Lashiel could. Is the same true, similarly, for the ladies and queens and mothers? Like, Bob says that Molly is going to turn into Maeve in 20 years, and maybe it's true, or does she actually have the ability to stay as she is if she fights hard enough for it and can be diligent enough? Is it something to do with the nature of being human? Maybe because Molly is currently human, then it would work, versus, say, like Maeve had already chosen to be a she. She was already stuck with certain restrictions.
Well, and theoretically, the she always start out as human, right?
Yes.
Like always. So, I don't think it's the fact that she's human, just, how long has she worn the mantle? And will she eventually
always start out as human? Is that a fact?
Yeah, the changelings. So they're always born.
Oh yeah, like that. Yeah, sure.
Yeah, or they steal your babies or whatever, right? Because like that's the Fae. That's their whole thing. So like that's the idea of the changeling, is that they take a baby and leave another in its place in some lores. And in the Dresden verse, you also have the, they're just a scion of a Fae. And because I mean, that's part of Leah's bargain, right? The whole, like, we want your baby. Maeve wanted Harry to sleep with her so that she could have a baby. I guess that's the only implication I could think of where, or not her, but Ginny Greenteeth, where I can think of where one of the Fae would have had a kid, at least in the Dresden verse. So I guess there is some of that, but otherwise it seems by and large like, anyway. The example that came to mind, I don't want to include in this show, but in any case, there are other implications and whatnot. But so we have at least the one example with Jenny Greenteeth, where it's like she was going to have sex with Harry in Summer Night and potentially have a kid that way, because that was his big thing with the water and all that jazz. But I got lost. What's the so we're talking about the kids. So just the Fae and the mantle and changing it. And also, like, honestly, I think it's a force of nature. Like, I really do think Molly, like, if anything, maybe she's got an edge because she was trained as a wizard. But I really do think the mantle's going to never was.
So at this point, it's okay. Like, it's accepted that a mortal can be a lady. And Lily was completely incapable of fighting because she had no training, and Titania was distraught over her daughter, never able to actually train her. And so Lily becomes a spitting image of Aurora.
Which actually shows a very human side to these forces of nature.
Yeah.
Right.
They're called.
And that's what I think they are. I mean, the mantles are a force unto themselves, basically.
But the host is still...
The host still has a human core.
Yeah. For a time.
It's a melt. It's the force of nature.
Even Mab at the end of Cold Days says, I was human once too. She mourned her daughter too.
Yeah. And
it's just like, so it's the human core is still there. She's not completely a force of nature.
Well, because she's a she, right? Because they're the closest to mortal anyway. And so they're always going to be part mortal. But, the mantle inevitably turns her into whatever Maeve was. And I mean, I still adhere to, like, it's going to be different. She's not going to be a carbon copy of Maeve. Otherwise, like, that wouldn't make a whole lot of sense anyway. But she is, like, a lot of those underlying personality traits are going to be there. And she is going to be pushed into some of those decisions. Like, Molly already doesn't have a lot of free will, aka Cold Case, right? Like, she tried to exercise free will, and that screwed her up and Carlos. So
she does have restrictions, but she might be able to stay Molly.
In a way she's already not, though. That's what I'm saying.
Yeah, that's true, because, she tries to... When she tries to lie, for example, she makes a decision to lie, but she's not, like, physically not allowed.
And she chose to sleep with Carlos, and she was physically not allowed. So,
which is weird when you think about it. That they are she's mentally allowed to make. She can make the choice. She can make the decision, but she's not able to carry it out.
And she at least temporarily lost her freedom of, her free will. So,
so she has restrictions, but like, I don't know if this is still really the same conversation, but like, imagine Mab as the Winter Lady.
Okay.
Mab, as she is as queen, is doing her duty. Maeve is running around partying all the time and not tending to her duties, and that's why Mab had issues.
Right.
Mab as Winter Lady, do you think she was running around partying like Maeve and only wised up when she became queen? Maybe there's a difference in the mantles, or there's a difference in the host.
Was she ever a lady?
Yeah, I was going to say, with splitting hairs, we don't know she was ever a lady. We know she was mortal, but we don't know she was ever a lady. So, but your point still stands to a point, right? Because Maeve was, quote unquote, shirking her duties, kind of, where she was just running around, partying and whatever. But how much of that was she was shirking the Mantles' duties versus she was shirking Mab's duties, right? Like, there's some wibble in there as well. Like, because, I mean, in some cases, they're one and the same, perhaps. Like, because part of the Winter Lady's function, apparently, is to go steal a bunch of children to fight in the never-ending war that is defending the outer gates. But is that a mandate of the mantle where it's going to override it, override your choice? Or does it just happen, right? So they do have some choice, apparently.
Was Maeve trying to exercise free choice by not doing the Mantle's duties and instead partying? I
don't know. But probably, I mean, because she just seemed like the late teens, early 20s, insolent child, basically on a meta scale, where it's just like, I'm not going to do what mommy told me to do because I hate mommy for whatever reason, because she's got mommy issues or daddy issues, who knows. But so I mean, it is kind of interesting, right? But Molly similarly isn't compelled to do this either. She just, it's kind of her duty, right? Like, there's a difference between, I guess, the imperative of the mantle and the duty as assigned by Mab.
I mean, the details might be assigned by Mab, but the duty of the Winter Mantle is to defend the outer gates.
Do we know that, though?
The duty right now is, like, seems like that goes on turns.
And right now,
he probably has other duties on that.
Well, and like, honestly, we don't know it in any way, shape, or form. Like, why then people are defenders of the gates? Like, why is it the She and not, the Norse? And was it ever the Norse? And was it the Greeks? And
there was a changeover at the Battle of Hastings, because that's pretty much the mark of the end of the Viking Age. That's when Norse started declining.
And that's heavily, heavily implied and all but taken as canon. But who has told you that? Like, where is it addressed in the books? Where does it discuss Mab ascending? Like, a lot of this is built on word of Jim and heavily implied. And we're like so far out on a limb ultimately. And that's why I was like, I like to speculate, but I'm not going to tell you like this is how it is. It seems to be the consensus. It seems to be the most likely answer.
Josh.
Right.
E.G. Help me.
Yeah, so I know there's like so many smarter people have spent so many more years looking into this sort of thing, right? But like we don't know that, right? And so we don't know what the mantles are really even there for. Like, that's the part that
until it's specifically said in the book. I mean, word of Jim is canon basically, right? But
it's the next best thing. Yeah. Because like I said, he can say, well, this is my idea, this is what's really going on behind the scenes, but unless it shows up in the book, like, and I'm not saying that to slight it, but the fact still stands, especially for future stuff, he could change it, and maybe he's not inclined to, but it could theoretically change.
It's about to make a bad analogy with it not being written in stone, but it's written in the book is basically what it is, so it's not really a good analogy anyway.
Right. Yeah. And I mean, theoretically, yes. In like 20 years, Disney could buy the Dresden Files and then we'll have the new canon and whatever. But yeah. But as it stands right now, like, you know, word of Jim, the reason why it's so sought after is because it's the next best thing to having a book out. Right. But at the same time, like, there's nothing in there that says, you know, the duties of the queen, you know, be a bitch, fuck up everybody's life, be bad to your daughter, steal a bunch of babies, defend the outer gates, you know, like so forth and so on. Like, we don't know why Mab is defending the outer gates. Like, why is it her and not the Norse? Other than we've got implications, and I think that's where some of the free will stuff comes into, and what we haven't gotten into yet. An
interesting on-topic discussion is: are the defenders allowed to say no? Is it a choice, or are they assigned it and here you go and that's that?
The heavy implication, actually drawing something from the books, is that the defenders might have the ability to say no, which would then corrupt the purpose of, say, the Winter Court. And Titania has the kill all button of I take Mab down with me because she's destroying everything.
True, and evidenced by the Nagloshi, because we discussed about that a little bit before the show as well.
Okay, so the story of the Nagloshi, I think Listens to Wind said, is that they were like the couriers, the psychopomp essentially take the souls of recently dead people to whatever afterlife they're getting to, and the Nagloshi decided not to. They just said, go run around and do things, and they're fun, and that's what corrupted them.
Right. Yeah, I mean, some wiggle and whatever, but yeah, that's largely like they shirked their duties and became these monstrosities instead. So again, like that's a fair thing. Like the Nagloshi, in a way, they were, you know, some celestial type of creature. Were they an angel? Like, or on that par of level? Like, where did they fit? You know, because I don't think they were in the lady levels or anything like that, right? But they exercised free choice at some point as well, where they would have otherwise theoretically not had it. You know,
presumably they have the free choice to start doing their duties again.
I mean,
I would assume so.
That's the implication, but we get all these words like immutable. You know, like, no, this guy doesn't have choice. He just is. And yet he had to have had choice, right? He very clearly, like, that's his whole fucking origin, is that he made a choice, flipped off the Navajo god or whatever, and then got cursed by it. Like, that's the origin story. He had choice.
So we have the words immutable, and then we have the, like, does Magog have choice to treat his host nicely?
Right. Apparently not. Apparently, for where it exists and where it's useful for our purposes, I would say they're immutable. But that's where I get hung up on the whole choice and free will and all that jazz, because over the entire arc of time, you know, for all time in the Dresden Files, and really, you know, a lot of this is sourced from, you know, our own mythos and our own fairy tales and whatnot. But, like, apparently at some point they had to have had it. Something happened where they lost it, but that mechanism's not understood. And that's why I have a tough time with these conversations, because the fallen angels are fallen because they made a fucking choice. The Nagloshi are fallen because they made a choice. For all I know, it was the same choice. Maybe they were a subset of angel, and that's all the same mechanism. That's clean, but hard to imply, especially when the Dresden Files takes the everybody is right approach, you know. So theoretically there's a Navajo god, or the Navajo gods, because I think it's a pantheon, and the Nagloshi said, nah, we don't feel like it today, but just that one time in all of time.
Okay, so the Nagloshi that are in Daemon Reach are the least. So whatever they are still worlds away from Uriel.
Right.
So there might be a subset. Maybe they're not, like, okay, so the Angel of Death that came in order to protect Fort Hill in Ghost Story, probably still a couple of tiers away from Uriel, because I think there's that much significance in being an archangel.
Go by supernatural angel tiers, there's like 6, I think. That's got some pieces in lore, but I'm not sure.
Right. There, I mean, there are theoretically levels, and, I mean, where do the cherubs fit in? But, as far as the Dresden Files, I'm going to stick with the two that we know for the most part, right? We've got just angels, and then we've got the archangels. So,
but the Denarians were archangels?
No, not all of them. Yeah,
that was a very painful no for you to say.
Well, I was thinking, because I mean, Lashiel wasn't. They may have been powerful angels, right? But Lucifer was an archangel, and maybe Anduriel was, but the rest of them don't seem to have been. So
why is the division? Why the 30 Denarians versus the countless other demons?
Because those were the most powerful ones, and Lucifer was afraid of them, per word of Jim, but we don't know why. Just that they were. Maybe because they were a unit. Maybe because Anduriel was the lieutenant, and
it's very not fence-sitting of Lashiel to be part of a unit.
Well, the decision had been made by then,
Maybe.
Because the implication there is that they fell. The war between heaven and hell raged on, and then once it was settled out and Lucifer had shored up his power base, in order to help secure his power base, he locked the Denarians in the coins. That's expanding upon a word of Jim at the very least. So it's wordof.jim-butcher.com if you want to catch up with a lot of the shenanigans we're talking in here. Because he talks about how Lucifer basically locked them in the coins to keep them away from him, to keep them from overthrowing him and then starting the whole thing over again in hell, basically. Okay. So maybe it's they were a unit, and Duriel was their leader, and that's why I'm like, I don't know. I don't think he was an archangel, but he could have been. I don't know if we've got any indication on that. And then the other 29 followed his lead.
Okay.
That's my headcanon. I don't know. So, like I said, a lot of the shit that I talk about, like, I'll tell you where it's sourced from, or I'll tell you, hey, this is my theory. I don't know. So,
here's a lighthearted question.
Okay.
Does Bob have choice?
Ish.
Ish.
Right? Because he can defy Harry, right? So he has some choice, and he decided in oh God, it's not Deadbeat. It's one
Blood
before
Rights.
It. Thank you. What the hell, brain? So he decided in Blood Rights not to follow Harry's command and go out, whoring, for lack of a better word, instead. Like, he went out to all the clubs.
Yeah.
But if Harry tells him to shut the hell up or I'll crush you, he listens, so.
I mean, most often, Harry doesn't give him a direct order. Harry threatens him with a hammer.
Well, there was that one time, but yeah.
He doesn't like give orders so much as he did the one in Deadbeat because this conversation is over, that necessary save. But can you imagine, say, Justin DeMorn or Kemmler letting Bob talk back at them? And obviously Bob had a different personality with Kemmler because different people, imprints. But would Bob have talked back to Kemmler?
Right. And that's part of it. So I think there are two components, and in a way they all tie back to the same component, right? Part of his ish on his free will is shaped by the owner's personality, which we also find out in Deadbeat, right? To the point where there are two Bobs, because Harry is so diametrically opposed to Kemmler and maybe Justin, that he had an entire different part of him that eventually got excised and became an entirely different Bob. So he got shaped by Harry, and he's still kind of the same Bob when he's with Butters, because Harry and Butters have similar personalities and they're laissez-faire, being a geek type of thing.
Bob was introduced to Butters while he was in possession of Harry, so Butters wanted an idea of who Bob is.
And I've heard that theory, and I like it as well, right? So there's those pieces, and then it comes down to how you interact with the skull beyond that, or maybe that's shaped by your interactions. Whereas, if Harry more often said "Shut up, Bob, and do what I told you," because about once a book he gives him an ultimatum anyway, though, right? Like there are a very high number of books, let's say it that way anyway, where he says, hey, I need you out of the skull, into the cat, go do your thing. In Blood Rights, he does it at least twice. The first time Bob rebels in a way, he doesn't follow the command. The second time, Harry's like, I don't give a shit, get in the fucking cat. During Deadbeat, we see it with the whole, you are allowed to leave the skull for the duration of this conversation, and then he loses free will when he says that this conversation is over, and reinforces their traditional interplay and that sort of thing. So I think Bob has maybe as much free will as any of the lesser Shi, and presumably he comes from the Never Never anyway, because he's had a run-in with Mab, or is at least afraid of her, and several others. And it goes beyond like him just knowing fucking everything. In my mind, I feel like he's had a personal connection there.
Is Bob compelled in a way to work with or for the owner? I mean, yes, he has to, in terms of the, like, I give you an order, you have to do it. Right. But like in Cold Days, when Harry comes back, Bob is basically distracting him because he's at that point owned by Butters, and Harry is a scary guy. And then what's her face? Andy attacks Harry and stuff like that. So it's just like, how much of that is his choice to actually work with Butters because Harry did scare him, or how much of it is a compulsion for him that he has to be on the side of the owner? Because also in Backup, when Thomas has basically the explanation info dump of the Oblivion War to Bob, Bob was like, I'm not helping you until you explain that you're not going to hurt Harry. Or something to that effect.
Part of it could be that Thomas at no point took possession of the skull.
Yeah.
So because I think it's either stated or at least implied that, ownership is a metaphysical thing as well, especially with something like Bob, where it's like, just because Harry wasn't present didn't mean that he was Thomas's. It did mean he was up for grabs, potentially. Like Thomas probably could have stolen Bob if it wasn't Thomas. Somebody could have stolen Bob and then done something else, presumably, but it might also have something to do with exercising your own will, right? Like if Harry exercises his will over Bob, then he becomes malleable.
Yeah. So, there have been points where they have to run out of the house, and Harry says, grab the skull, put it in a bag, and we run. Deadbeat is a perfect example.
Right.
But even though Harry isn't the one who grabbed Bob, I don't think, but at least in other situations, he definitely wasn't.
Right.
Bob still remained in his possession.
Right. Okay.
So it's not just like grabbing and moving the skull. That in some form has to be a choice to take him.
Yeah, it has to be will. You have to make a willful, an act of will. I can buy that. So
yeah, I mean, it just clearly the fact that Bob was in a backpack and then he starts talking when they're at Murphy's house, and then at some point when Harry comes back, Bob's on the table. Someone had to have moved him. It wasn't Harry, but he's still owned by Harry. So,
well, and maybe that comes around to, I mean, his ownership changed several times, right? So maybe he was briefly owned by Butters, then he was owned by Cowell, and then Harry got him back again, right? So, because, and I even read that recently, and how did he get him back from Cowell? Because I know he gave him commands. I know he got in a T-Rex. Did he grab him?
Cowell
was that what
put
happened?
him down in order to do the Dark Hollow. So Cowell was like all tied up. And when Bob was on the table, picnic table, something,
Harry gave him the command.
Oh,
he also winked, right?
Yeah, I gave you a name. Ooh, that's significant.
Right.
And then he winked.
Which there you go. There's episode 3 in this series.
Naming Jesus Christ.
Naming
Names
and
free will.
Exactly. Should we do that one next? Because the implication
names certainly have an influence in individuality. They have power, and they granted free will to Lashiel's shadow.
Names are a mantle, confirmed. Woo! All right.
Justin is a mantle. I'm gonna put it on now, so now I'll be Justin. I like Star Wars too.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm brain fried.
So I guess it does kind of lend itself back towards, it was an act of will for Bob, but also maybe he gave Bob some individuality by naming him. So
Google Hangouts.
So Andreas is a mantle of Andreas. Confirms. There's two of you.
The topic was just like so big that Hangouts was like, I can't deal with this.
Okay, plug. Do the plug. Brain fried.
So Bayer aspirin. No. So also, you guys can endorse us too. I've given out freebies here, so that's just what came to mind. I don't, whatever. But
not sponsored, but hit us up.
Right. We'll give you a plug. I don't. Yeah. So our other podcasts, we've got Dangerous to Go Alone, which is a podcast about nerd and geek culture. We've got the Great Scott podcast, which the rumor has it that they're getting close to being done with The Office. And
maybe they do when they're done.
They're towards the end of season 6. Last time I heard.
Okay.
And do we know what they're doing going forward?
They were talking.
Once they get through all 9 seasons of The Office, I think there's 9. Then they'll figure that out.
Are they gonna watch the British version?
I've got an answer if you stop for 3 seconds. God. I was going to say the rumor has it that they were going to look at Parks and Rec, but I don't remember if the director told us that or if that was Jacob. So
I think it was Jacob had said something about that. He's also, they're thinking about the British version. I suggested they do The Simpsons and they'll never ever run out.
Right.
That's true.
They'll die of old age before they even get caught up at that point.
They never have to think about what's the next episode.
Right. That's funny. But there's I was thinking the IT crowd, they're doing an American version or trying again with an American version. Yeah, so that should be good times. Anyway, there's High Fantasy. How about you plug that one?
We did the middle. We faced the fear. We talked about the middle. It was a lot of like, you can do it if you do it right kind of advice.
Yeah, I mean, rule number 1 of most things is that if you're going to do it, don't suck.
Right. Yeah, that's all you have to do.
You heard it here first. So you want to be a writer? Don't suck at it. That's step 1. Podcasts, don't suck at it. Oh, God, we're so sad. No. And then there's us, and you're listening to us. So,
yeah. So next time we talk about metaphysics and cosmology.
Yeah, that unless we want to pivot on the naming thing, because maybe that'll give you less of a headache. I don't know. So
probably not. Probably
one of those two things. But yeah, here comes the cosmology, and I guess that's where we'll start talking about mirror, especially because that's where we find out about it, and it shatters the multiverse, and we find out all of these things. And seriously, though, if you want a spoiler for that, go read. Like Jim has words on this. Like I feel like we know more about mirror sometimes than we do about peace talks. So
yeah, probably. Okay. Bye. Have a good night.
Bye.
Bye.